Good morning, everyone. My name is Ellie Confirst, and this is a special report. Tonight, we're talking about the importance of biodiversity. Biodiversity, as defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, is, quote, the variety of life in the world or in a particular habit or ecosystem, unquote. Presently, biodiversity is being lost at an alarming rate. Experts have estimated that the rate of biodiversity loss is up to 1,000 times faster than the naturally occurring rate, largely due to overexploitation of land, destruction of natural habitats, and human-caused climate change. In order to emphasize the urgency of resolving this crisis, we will be hearing from experts in a variety of fields tonight, including environmentalism, economics, and ethics. The reality is, biodiversity should be protected whether it benefits us or not. Humanity is facing a moral dilemma that will decide the future of all life on this planet. With that, let's go to Clark Doman, an environmental scientist at Harvard University.
Greetings, Ellie. Thank you for having me on the show. Where do I even start on biodiversity? According to Darwin's theory of evolution, we, human beings, like all other life forms, underwent the process of evolution. Therefore, we are not special organisms that are inherently superior to other life on Earth. We have a moral obligation to protect biodiversity whether or not it helps us or the environment. That being said, biodiversity has a tremendously positive effect on the environment. In fact, biodiversity is the fabric that holds ecosystems together. For example, although they may not seem like they're that important to the environment as a whole, wolves in the American West are incredibly important to the environment because they limit the amount of deer and other plant-eating animals. Without wolves, the deer would have no natural predators, and their populations would grow to absurdly high numbers. They would feed on grasses and other vegetation until the plants were negatively affected and unable to reproduce in the same abundance. This would detrimentally affect the ecosystem as a whole. This example shows how one species can be crucial to the well-being of an ecosystem, as well as the entire environment. We must protect each species that is threatened with unnatural extinction so that the environment can remain as healthy as possible. From Harvard, this is Clark Doman signing off.
Thank you so much for your insights, Clark. Now, let's hear about the importance of biodiversity to the economy from Diana Spencer, an economist at the London School of Economics. Take it away, Diana.
Thank you for having me, Ellie. So many people say that it's impossible to put a price on biodiversity. Some others believe that biodiversity is not an economic issue at all. However, I would like to show you how biodiversity directly impacts our economy by focusing on international trade and economic activities. First, a lot of economic activities depend on the conservation of species. Specifically, biodiversity is important for food and agriculture as it supplies healthy soils, pollinating plants, and habitat for wildlife. These conditions ensure high quantity and quality of food, thus allowing us to keep consumption high and therefore to increase GDP, all else equal. Second, preserving biodiversity means preserving tourist attractions. In Kenya, where wildlife is the main attraction, tourism supported 8.8% of the country's GDP in 2008, almost 9%. This clearly demonstrates the importance of biodiversity in a country's economy. Finally, biodiversity is necessary for manufactured pharmaceuticals, which not only represent an important percentage of some countries' exports, but also promote health globally. In this case, the lack of biodiversity would negatively affect international trade and worse, health and human capital. So friends, biodiversity is definitely an economic issue.
Thank you for joining us, Diana. I want to emphasize Diana's point that a failure to protect biodiversity will be more expensive and restrictive to our freedoms than the costs necessary to protect it. Let's now turn to our final expert of the evening, Brendan McFeely, professor of ethics at the University of Notre Dame. Welcome, Brendan.
It's great to be here, Ellie. Well, it's hard to measure the explicit value and ethical implications of protecting biodiversity, It's fundamental that we understand that under most guidelines of ethics, we have an obligation to protect other species. Whether you're an atheist or a Catholic, the fundamental underpinnings of people's lives in terms of morals turn to death. To save a life is, in most cases, better than not. So failure to protect biodiversity results in the death of countless animals, which is simply bad ethics. Plus, there's lots of benefits to a diverse environment, which provides everybody with a richer understanding of the world. As a result, we're able to become better educated and ultimately better citizens to ourselves and each other.
I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this matter, Brendan. You bring up a lot of important points, namely that evaluating the costs and the benefits of biodiversity purely from the perspective of how it helps humanity is an incomplete way of viewing the issue. To properly understand the importance of biodiversity, we all have to understand that we are only part of the larger system that allows all life to coexist on this planet. Biodiversity is necessary to sustain human life, but it would be important regardless of whether that was true. Because of that, the conception that protecting biodiversity is simply too costly ignores our moral responsibility to protect the right of all life on Earth to exist. Thank you all for joining us this morning for this special report. I hope you understand now why it is so necessary that we protect biodiversity, regardless of whether it benefits humanity or not. We'll see you next week to discuss sports hunting. Until then, I'm Ellie Conforst.